Hello there.
Hello, everybody.
Oh, I guess I have to rename myself. Hello there. So are there just 5 or 6 of us here who are members?
Yeah, it looks like we have.
You have about 8 people right now, I believe.
I show 15.
Well, you have 15 total with attendees.
Yeah. All right.
Any members of your task force.
5. Yeah, I think just 6 of us are so far are members, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, and David is saying he needs to be added to the panel. He's saying that in the Q&A.
Got it.
Tina is not going to join.
Yeah.
Thank you. Hello, everyone.
Don't take it personally, David.
I don't.
Very good. All right, then how about we wait just a couple minutes and then we'll be ready to start.
Okay, let's see.
While we wait, I'm going to put something in the chat. I'm sure many of you might have seen this. Mayor's office announcement.
On what?
On housing, I'm sorry. I just put I put a link in the chat.
And what is it?
Yeah, they have a task force on racial equity and inclusion. They announced new requirements for giving MWBs and nonprofits greater ownership stake in affordable housing projects built on any of the city-owned sites. It's a good change, but wasn't allowed before.
Great, thanks for sharing. That's awesome.
Well, Katie and Viren, you do have a quorum.
Yeah, perfect. And let's go ahead and get started. Thank you, Jesse. So welcome everybody to our, I guess, December meeting of our Social and Racial Justice Task Force of Community Board 4. As many of you know, we started officially as a task force back in September, and we meet monthly on the 3rd Tuesday. I am Katie Stokes, one of the co-chairs, and my other co-chair is in another window. Hello, Viren.
Hi, I'm Viren Bramber, the co-chair.
Exactly. Viren or Jesse, do one of you have the agenda we can share on the screen for people maybe who hadn't seen it yet? And for those who saw our original agenda, just to let you know, we had invited someone to come speak to us, the former chair of the CCRB, the Civilian Complaint. What is the official title there? Civilian Complaint Review Board?
Yeah.
Is that right, Karen? Yeah. Her name was Deborah Archer. She's the former chair of the board, and she was going to come speak to us. Unfortunately, she was unable to attend this evening due to a family issue, and so she is going to try and join us in January. So we have postponed that discussion until our next meeting. And let's think. So just some quick housekeeping as a quick review. This is being recorded this evening. It's a public meeting that's being recorded and available both to stream now or available on YouTube later on. There will be discussions happening this evening per the agenda. And first, our committee members will be participating and asking questions. And then if we have time and ability, we will also turn to our public and let them comment or ask questions as well. And with that, Viren, do you want to go ahead and start with our first agenda item?
Oh, right, I was just looking for the agenda. Thanks, Jesse.
Perfect.
No worries.
All right. So the first item on the agenda is conversation on equitable street sidewalks. And this is going to be a joint conversation. It actually originated in Transportation Committee meeting where sidewalk maintenance was being discussed. And the conversation sort of, Christine actually took a lead on the issue that our streets are not exactly fair in terms of the distribution of space as well as the manner in which the budgets, citywide budgets, are allocated. So, for example, maintenance of the sidewalks remains the onus on the property owner, whereas the sort of blacktop and the vehicular right-of-way is managed, maintained, and paid for through the taxpayers' money by the city. So that's one of those issues that sort of came up. And in terms of being able to maintain the sidewalk, city is not spending enough money. City is not spending any money practically. It's the onus is on the property owner, whether it's commercial or residential. There are some exceptions, and Christine will correct me on that. So that's where the conversation. So I just want to give you an overview of where the conversation began. And Christine also brought up the issue about equity, and not simply just in terms of pedestrian versus car ownership, but also social and racial equity. People jaywalking, people riding their bicycles, people getting tickets for parking in the wrong spot or breaking the traffic light. Those numbers also show disparities. So that's where the conversation began. So there are two ways of doing this, Christine. Do you have the document that you actually presented at Transportation Committee meeting handy?
I thought I was going to talk about one or two other things before.
Okay.
And the first thing is that from a number standpoint, there are about 66% of the people who walk and commute in New York City are, Black and brown and non-white, and only 33% are white. The other people, the balance of the people drive. And so I've selected those, and that comes from the census. And when you look at those numbers, so this population, which is using the sidewalk, is heavily tilted toward Black and brown population. And then inside that, you see some disparities. I mean, some interesting stats, like 3/4 of the Hispanic population walks and commute, on transit versus driving, which is a big difference. So in those communities, walking is a very important, is a very key part. So based on that, you can look at the pedestrian a little bit as a proxy for racial disparity, in a sense, because really the pedestrian is where you have most Black and brown people in the city. And for the city to not maintain and not treat in a way that the population of pedestrian is essentially like a deep discrimination in the sense that obviously Black and brown people are way more affected than others by this disconnect. So that's the first context and why we thought that discussing the sidewalk was something very important vis-a-vis the equity system. So let me give you some examples of level of services, which are, there are three differentiation: the level of service, the space, and the access. And I'm going to give you some example of each of those for discussion. So the city, as Viren said, does not maintain the sidewalk, even though it's used by the largest group of taxpayers. So our tax go for the maintenance of the car space. The DOT budget virtually doesn't spend any money on pedestrians. For the DOT, it takes about a week to fix a pothole on the roadway. But because the sidewalk is maintained by the landlord, it can take from 6 months to 18 months to repair. And then when the same roadway space is converted from the car use to pedestrian use, like a neck down, then the city decide that they don't want to maintain it and they don't want to insure it. So the same space going from drivers to sidewalk is not maintained. The sanitation budget is dedicated to roadway and cars, and it's not dedicated to sidewalk. So the city sweeps the roadway, but not the sidewalk. And the city clears the roadway from snow, but not the sidewalk for pedestrians. They even put the snow at the curb, bus stop, and corners, which make life even more difficult for pedestrians to walk. And there are a zillion of parking agents which are regulating the parking lane, but none of them is enforcing obstruction on the sidewalk. For the space, the signal cycles, what we call the green wave. So you are in a car and all the lights get green at an interval, so that you don't have to stop. Well, those signals favor automobiles, but there is a different way to do signals, which could be good also for pedestrian and cyclists, which don't have to stop, and it's not being done. It's done just for the cars. And indeed, the sidewalk space is very, very small compared to the population. And then the access issues, these are examples. If you have 25 car/driver gathering a roadway as a caravan, and they don't ask for a permit. But if you have people walking in the roadway, pedestrian or cyclists, they have to ask for permission for that. Even on the sidewalk, the pedestrian cannot be gathering at more than 10 or so. But in the roadway, if you have congestion and gridlock, you don't have to ask permission. It's happening every day. And when people chant in the street, it's a demonstration. But when cars honk and yell in the street, there is no enforcement. So these are the differences we have seen, and we know that it's because for years and years and years, the car has been, put on the top of the priorities. But by doing that indirectly and in a very deep way, there is an impact on pedestrian. And it just happened that amongst the pedestrians, 66% are, non-Black or brown.
Yeah.
And so we thought this is something we could work on collectively, because there are some issues which are pure access and very much about equity, and some which are a little more technical that transportation could work on.
Yeah, I'm just going to add a couple of quick items to that list that you just mentioned. It actually begins when even before the sidewalk is made or a house comes up on a lot. So when as an architect, I can tell you that if I propose a house on an empty lot, the first thing I have to submit is the tree pit application. And I'm required to pay $500 fee to the city so the city can plant a tree on the sidewalk. So even that is not being paid by the city. At the same time, the benefit is much larger and it goes beyond the lot. So what I'm trying to say is that even if you don't look at the race and color and social injustice, even purely in economic terms, there's a disparity that kind of is very jarring. 27% of folks, less than 27% of people in New York City actually own cars. In Manhattan, it's even less than that, 10% or something. Jesse can correct me. But our sidewalks are the most contested spaces, so to speak. 48% of the sort of land mass, I believe, in the city is covered with blacktop. So that begins to tell you this kind of inequities in spatial distribution of what we consider to be public space. And when I say that 48%, that does not include public space. It's just the vehicular traffic. So these are very important numbers to sort of take into account. And then beyond that, as Christine was pointing out, different demographics are having to contend with different ways of being targeted. And that's where the conversation becomes sort of more collective between these two, between the task force and the transportation committee.
Darren, can I just add one other contextual notion?
Yes, please.
Okay, so you both touched on this, but when urban planners look at the way our cities are laid out, urban and transportation planners, they note the glaring inequity of how much space, how much real estate is designated for vehicles versus pedestrians. So a lot of the movement, a lot of the changes you see, a lot of the 10 currents you see in urban planning, city design, and transportation planning are in effect an effort to reclaim portions of the street for other uses other than cars. That's why you talk about these big rollouts of bicycle lanes versus that are effectively taking away from cars. That's why you talk about open streets proposals, not just in New York, but in many cities around the country and around the world, where it's far more extensive and successful. So just have that in your mind as a current in thinking about city planning, which is that there's a lot of thinkers in this sphere who believe that we need to take back a lot of the space that's designated for vehicles.
You're totally right. And then other thing that we don't only contest with other pedestrians, but cars being partially parked over the sidewalk, the trash collection along the sidewalk every couple of days, all of that actually keeps narrowing the space that is supposed to be the right of way. So there are many issues that sort of overlap. And I think that the reason why it's being discussed here is because the thought was that the task force could have a kind of open conversation amongst the members and then sort of move it towards whether we should do something about it. What do we do? What the next steps would be? What are the actionable items? Where do we see the overlaps? And where do we come up with a strategy, whether we convey this to the city agencies or the sort of higher ups and the powers to be, so that moving forward, when city looks at possible changes, our voices are heard.
Yeah, I want to bring up the thing that I think is very, very fundamentally wrong is the allocation of money between one population and another one, right? It starts there. If people don't want, everybody say we want equity, and the next day is you say, okay, you are going to have equity, but you are only going to have 2% of the budget. Immediately, I know that something is wrong, right? And I think the idea here is to say, let's reclaim portions of the budget for the right people with a mind to equity in a space where people don't even think this way. You know, in transportation, people think about pedestrian and drivers, but when you know who are the pedestrian and who are the transit users, well, it's a proxy for equity. And if the city doesn't want to spend money on transporting the people, you know, Black and brown people, then I guess we have a problem, right?
Katie, Viren,
Yes.
I wasn't sure. Are you guys? I was going to take down the agenda because I know I see
Yes,
Dolores
you can take it down.
hand raised, and I wasn't sure if you're moving into committee or task force conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we are. We can take it down. Yes, thank you. Sorry, Christine, you were finishing your thought.
No, I'm done. I'm just saying, you know, if my measure in life is where is the money? I was a director of finance, I was a CFO, and beside what everybody says, then you go and see where is the money. And then that tells you whether people are really serious about stuff.
Yeah.
So that was a little bit of my approach there from my past, saying, okay, where's the money? And they said, well, the money is not there. So what are you talking about? You want to do equity, but there's no money.
And I suppose we as the Transportation Planning Committee co-chairs are asking this task force to sort of a little bit of a division of labor in terms of like breaking out I mean, it's all related and it's all intertwined, but we can address this issue as an equity issue, and we can address this issue as the nuts and bolts of transit matters. And, you know, we can do it in a harmonious and coordinated way. So that's what we're looking to jump off here.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, you know, Christine, I love your approach of, you know, following the money and looking at the numbers. I think that's super important. I do think we have to acknowledge that while, you know, the majority of people who use cars in the city are white, it's also important to acknowledge that obviously everybody who lives in the city depends on deliveries and trucks coming in and, you know, bringing in food and resources for our grocery stores and our bodegas and everything. So it is important that, I mean, we do want money obviously spent on the roads because we need all of that, but clearly there needs to be more done, a lot more done. But it's funny because part of me sort of feels like I'm a little worried, but this might be the cynical piece of me. I'm a little worried that a lot of big real estate developers will say, oh yeah, right on, you're right. You know, the city should be focused on the sidewalks and it shouldn't be the owners of the buildings. And they wouldn't be focused on the equity piece of it. They would just be focused on not having to be responsible for clearing the sidewalks.
So that's a really good point. But when you think of it, you can think also of the owner turning that, and you know, they are the big building, but the majority of the building in the city are not that big buildings. So they are smaller building, and then they turn the responsibility over to the shop owner, you know, and then the shop has to deal with the maintenance and the legal risk, et cetera, et cetera. So that's another burden on the small shop owner as well as. So, you know, everybody's saying, well, what are we doing for the shop owners? Are we going to help them? And you could say, well, yeah, you could, you know, you could take care of their sidewalk. That would be one thing that they don't have to do anymore, because why should they, right? And by the way, you should know that before 2003, the city was taking care of the sidewalks. So it was changed in 2003, and by taking care, there are two portions. One is the repairs, and one is the cleaning, maintenance, snow, right? So the repairs were taken care by the city.
Also, on your point about...
Actually, hold on just a second, Dale.
Yeah.
Sorry, Dolores is saying, I believe, Dolores, you were saying you need to leave in just a second. Did you want to say something before you left?
I apologize. Yeah, I'm hosting a meeting in a few minutes. I my concern was is if we're looking at our own district, this is, and what Dale's saying, intertwined, it's absolutely intertwined, and it's so desperately needed in Midtown because of our sidewalk congestion and the lack of focus on pedestrians, period. But my concern is that if it's advocating on a citywide basis, the rest of the city is just so different in terms of how people get around and the reliance on their own vehicles, how that looks for us advocating for that type of change. It sounds almost as bad as when Corey Johnson from this district says, we're gonna kill the car culture in the city, and how people respond to that type of comment in other boroughs. And then I'm not quite sure how the taxes work. Do we, to Katie's point, are rich landowners and developers saying goody goody, not my problem anymore? But then the other thing is how are we going to create that equity when there's let's say a part of another district that has a lower tax base, and so they don't get a piece of that pie in really developing their pedestrian space. But yet here we're in Midtown and we get like twice the size because we have a higher tax base. So those are just some things I wanted to raise, and I apologize. Hopefully I'll be able to watch the video so I can hear the conversation afterward when I finish with my other meeting.
Good point.
Apologies.
Thanks, Dolores.
Added to that is another issue, right? The legal responsibility of anything happening on a sidewalk actually falls by default on the owner. So there's a lot more that's intertwined with equity of the sidewalk. It's not just merely that the taxes that we pay, but it's also how the legal structure would sort of be affected by that. So we have to keep that in mind as well. But Del, I'll come back to you in 2 minutes, in 1 minute actually. So the only point, I don't know exactly how and where we fit in, but I think the conversation is important. I don't think the onus is on us to come up with a solution. Our task is to actually raise right questions, and then collectively people come up with right answers. And to Dolores' point, we can focus on our district if that's the purview that we are offered. Sorry, Del.
Oh, it's okay. I was just going to address Katie's point about deliveries. So a couple of things. The way you talked about delivery presupposes delivery by truck, vehicles that ride on the streets, which is, where we're at as a city, like a vast, not just the last mile portion of the delivery, but a vast majority of our freight loads is trucked. And that's because of the collapse of our train infrastructure. So a lot of, transportation planners would say we are wholly over-reliant on roadbed for the movement of goods. Also specifically, and this is, it's really funny because a lot of, as being on the committee on transportation planning, we get tons of complaints from people who want to live in quiet, enjoyable tree-lined streets, but they constantly complain about truck traffic. And, we make a distinction. There's through truck traffic and there's local delivery truck traffic. And the bottom line is more and more, and especially exacerbated by the pandemic, we are ordering goods online and those are being delivered by truck. So if you don't want trucks on your street, stop calling Amazon every time you need something, maybe. But another point about that is that last mile delivery of our packages from the drop that either UPS or the post office does is handled by third-party contractors who are grossly underpaid. And a lot of that work is being outsourced or off-sourced to our sidewalks.
Yeah.
So instead of having like Amazon delivery operation in a retail space, they're literally sorting and distributing packages on the streets and sidewalks. It is a business. It's a business practice. It's a component of Amazon's business that is being done for free in our streets and on our sidewalks. So that's the equity portion of that discussion about delivery service, about delivery of goods. How, because we so overfavor blacktop, these companies are saying, well, hell, we'll just truck everything. And then Amazon has taken it to another exploitative level and said, why do I have to pay these guys a decent wage? Why do I have to give them benefits?
Mhm.
Why do I have to have a retail rent or a warehouse rent when I can offload it onto New York City's generous streets and sidewalks?
Yeah.
So that's how I would frame the equity discussion about package delivery.
And also, just to add to that, package delivery, I don't know if people know about it, but Amazon delivery system now actually is occupying our streets with the delivery bicycle dogs. I don't know if you noticed that, bicycle dogs in the carts. And hopefully city is making money by renting those spaces. We don't know, but that's already happening. So streets are contested, sidewalks are even much more contested. But before we go on, Jesse has
and real quick on one other thing. I mean, it is a very welcome business opportunity for a lot of Black and brown people to do that last mile delivery service.
Yes.
However, the conditions are exploitative.
Yeah. No, totally right. Before we open up the conversation for all the other members, Jesse has to step off. So if there are any questions, now would be the time to ask of him. Does anyone have any questions for Jesse? Nope. Okay, Jesse. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thanks,
guys.
Jesse.
Sorry for interrupting. So I think we should probably, Katie, tell me if you want to open up the conversation so each member can sort of have an opinion.
Yeah,
Please.
sounds good.
Okay. So should I go? Does anyone want to raise hand, or should I just go? Oh, James, yes, please.
Yeah, I guess I'm just confused. What are we trying to accomplish here? Are we trying to get Amazon to have better pay practices and benefits? Are we trying to get the city to prioritize cleaning the streets and shift the burden of cleaning the streets to the city versus individual property owners? Are we, we're talking about, I mean, and I understand, look, I have so much respect for Christine. Christine knows that she's been deep in these issues for so long. So maybe it's just me not fully comprehending. We've covered a lot of topics, and I think a lot of them have some merit. I don't know. I'm not fully understanding what we're getting at.
No, I think that's fair. I think we started with the idea of, as I said, not enough money is being spent on the pedestrians, like zero. So it seems that there is a lot of space to do improvement. And then what would be the improvement we want, right, with that money? So one of the improvement would say maintain the sidewalk, and just like you are maintaining the street, the roadway. That would be kind of the number one request right off the bat, because that's and then there are some ancillary asks around that, but that would be the first big one. The first big one would say, you are not spending any money on this, you are spending too much money on that, and why don't you move some money from here to there and start spending more on the sidewalks? Because
do we have any?
Let me just finish on that. The thing which is insidious in that lack of responsibility and money is that the DOT does not consider the pedestrian part of their purview, because they don't have a budget, because they don't spend money on that. So when you look inside the DOT, you will see that the units which is in charge of the road has a huge budget, huge importance, right? And then the bikes are starting to have a little bit more budget, so they have a lot of importance. Then the pedestrian is like they don't exist. And so you see even reflected inside the DOT. and the fact that they are not spending the money and they are not responsible and they are not, you know, on call when there is a problem on the sidewalk makes it that the pedestrians just don't exist there.
Right. So historically, I'm curious, Christine, do we have any data on, because my understanding is that historically property owners have been responsible for maintaining the sidewalks in front of their properties. Is that accurate?
Only since 2003.
Okay.
And by maintaining, we need to split in two things. One is repairs, and the other one is sweeping and cleanliness.
So then my follow-on question is the contention that the city should undertake some of that responsibility or shift it back? Like, what is the practical outcome?
I think the practical is to say it should be the same level of maintenance that you give to the blacktop.
So that means a changing of the standards.
Yeah.
i.e. hold, like, it's an enforcement.
Well, it's a change of scope of work, it's a change of level of service, and it's a change of who is responsible for. So
well, sorry. So that's two very different things. And again, I'm not arguing. I'm just trying to figure out.
I know.
Yeah. So if it's, because to suggest, which I think makes sense, that property owners should be held to a certain standard in terms of maintaining the sidewalks in front of their properties. I mean, that makes sense to me because, you know, Lord knows, you know, you walk across one section of sidewalk and it's pristine, it looks nice. And then you walk across like 10 feet later and it's cracked, it's got asphalt filler, it's got graffiti, like it's terrible. So that's one issue. But then the other issue,
just so we're clear though, James, I think I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. So I think what Christine is suggesting is that it would be having the city be responsible for maintenance of the sidewalks. Right now, it is the landlord.
Oh, but that was my second thing that I was going to,
yes.
Because the one thing was, you know, under the current laws and regulations, it is the property owner. And then the second thing that Christine mentioned was, do we shift it back to the city? And is that the way to go? My concern there is, I mean, we're in the middle of the greatest financial crisis this city has seen probably in decades. And we saw the budget numbers. I don't know if it was this committee or another committee. I might have them somewhere. There's so many services that are going to be cut as it is. I don't know that this would be a welcome change now.
Well, my suggestion is that money be shifted inside the DOT. For example, in a recent report, the DOT said, not the DOT, the DOT said that for, potholes, they have exceeded all the requirements they had by so much, by 10% of repairing all the potholes. So I'm saying, maybe you don't have to repair all the potholes that much and be so good and so exceeding your performance. You make a little less response. You resurface the blacktop even instead of 7 years, every 9 years, right? And now you have money that can be applied to the other thing.
Can I say
I'm not suggesting that there is an explosion of expense.
I was just trying to say the same thing in money terms. We as taxpayers pay for everything, including the blacktop, but we particularly pay for maintenance of sidewalks. What is being suggested, if you take all the taxpayers' money, spread it evenly, and consider the street from building to building, and include the sidewalks in that public right-of-way.
Right.
Don't use more money on the blacktop and none at all on the sidewalks. So we're not asking people to spread it thin, but spread it evenly.
Right.
Find a way of doing it. And I think Christine's suggestion is pretty good. Instead of resurfacing the blacktop every 7 months, do it every 9 months.
I have a question for Christine. In 2003, what precipitated that change of administration?
I think that at the time, it was to save on lawsuits. So the city was not doing a great job on maintaining the sidewalks. And people, knowing that the city was behind, were suing right and left. And in order to save that those legal risks, they moved the responsibility to the owners.
I mean,
So
that
it was not really for the purpose of moving the maintenance. It's really for the purpose of not paying the legal fees.
Exactly. And I think, Christine, just to sort of clarify, city has been doing this back and forth a few times. Even prior to that, it was actually on, the onus was on property owners. So it's not only in 2003, it has switched back and forth. That's what I'm trying to say.
Oh, I didn't know that. Right, right.
Yes.
Also, another thing we could do is, and this would be monumental, is that if they charge us, say, $3 per package, a percentage of that, city takes over the sidewalk, will go for sidewalk maintenance and possibly street maintenance. I mean, the gravel they use on the streets is such poor quality. In Europe, they use much better gravel.
Yeah.
So they wouldn't need to repair it, maintain it as much. And maybe when these private companies dig up or get permits to do stuff on the sidewalks, where that they should be charged a higher fee also, and a percentage of that would go back to maintaining the sidewalks. And also loading zones would also help tremendously. And I know you're working on this, Christine, which would be a tremendous help to all the city, is the TORS program, where the trash is put in the street rather than the walkway.
Yeah, but that's okay. That's not.
But all that is part of that quality of life for, let's say, Brown and whatever, and all New Yorkers, but Brown New Yorkers. That's what we're concentrating on this committee. But I mean, that would be a way of doing it. If people getting packages would charge, maybe not per package, but per delivery, and then a percentage would go to maintaining sidewalks, and it would be more equitable and maintained.
Can I jump in?
Yes,
I
please.
just want to pick up on where James left off. I mean, I really appreciate this report, and I understand what you're saying, Christine. I just feel like I don't know how this is really going to target the serious inequities we have in social and racial justice issues in the city for Black and Latino people in terms of unemployment, homelessness, not getting into the best schools, you name it, it's all there. And I think that the whole issue with pedestrians right now, my feeling is that's going to change anyway. With COVID, the open streets, the streets taking over the sidewalks, shops taking over the sidewalks. I mean, I would hope that at some point that these landlords will take it a little more seriously, but quite honestly, I'm a big walker. I walk around this area all the time in CB4. And, if we're just talking about keeping it to this area, and we're not talking about other parts of the city where it's really scandalous that garbage is not picked up in the way that it is here, and it's very noticeable, strikingly different, then I'm not really sure how, what improvements are we really making in the quality of life of Black and Latino people in this district? Because you can spend a whole lot of time doing this. And like I said, I totally respect what you're doing and your efforts. I just want to know, is this going to trickle down and really improve the lives of the people that we're fighting for on this committee? The communities, I should say.
Well, I don't know. I don't know that it's going to have a huge impact. I think that it is first of all, we are transportation, so we can't address all the other issues you have raised, right? So the other committees should be stepping up to the plate. And just because we do one thing doesn't mean that the other people shouldn't be doing anything else. So that's not, we are not choosing to do one thing instead of other things, right? That should be just the beginning of a process. But I think it's very important to tell the city and the elected officials that they have to put the money where their mouth is. And I think it is very, very critical to start to look at everywhere in the city's budget where people are spending money for one category on people and not for the other categories. You know, I think that's critical. And if we don't do that, I don't think we are doing the job. And each of us, each of the communities should be doing that, looking at, you know, housing subsidies, where is it given? Where's the money going? You know, etc. So each item should be looked at in that same spirit and say, look, if the money is not being spent in the right place, then I don't think we're doing the job. Yeah. I mean, I think that's my view.
I would also add that it's something of it's like a kind of larger issue when you look at transportation issues, but it also there are also impacts that the way that the inequity is built into the system of getting around in the city. For instance, it's been noted many times that Black and brown pedestrians are more often prosecuted for something like jaywalking than white pedestrians. It's been noted that cyclists are Black and brown cyclists are targeted for ticketing and prosecution more unfairly than their white counterparts. So I think it opens up that whole discussion of how the inequities roll out from the baseline fact that sidewalks are not counted in this as a city budget line item because Bloomberg essentially offloaded them to the private sector as a budget trick. I mean, the lawsuits were the precipitating factor, but it was also Bloomberg, you know, privatizing in effect a public asset.
I think along those lines, I mean, very good point, Dale. And along those lines, you know that we have been trying to install neck downs for pedestrian safety, right? And we have been trying to do that in the neighborhood. Well, the reality is because the city does not maintain the sidewalk, they don't want to maintain the neck down, which means that essentially in any community in the city where people don't have the means, then they cannot benefit from pedestrian safety features. Yeah. So, you know, by unlocking that mechanism, we are unlocking a lot of different things that become feasible where today they are not.
This is one very quick point. I want other people, want to hear from other people. A word here and a word there changes perception of people. So I totally get your point, Josephine, that if you focus only on our district, would it have a trickle-down effect? My hope is that if we start the conversation, somebody else will hear it. Yes. And then they would want to join the conversation. And that's the hope, right? And hopefully it'll gain momentum. I mean, when we started this social and racial justice group as a working group, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, CB4 was the first one to initiate that. And then now we hear that the other community boards are also looking into that, right? So hopefully this will trickle down. And one quick example I'll give you before I go, an academic conversation that began at Pratt Institute is now becoming one of the sort of agenda items for the mayoral race. And that's about actually changing the building code to allow some of the basement and other sort of unusable spaces to be converted into affordable housing, to increase the affordable housing stock in New York City. So, you know, sometimes it sounds like a very small point or an argument, but somebody really takes it on and hopefully something will happen. James.
Yeah, I totally understand and respect what you're saying. I guess maybe if it were a different time and this was happening, but there's this big push in New York City to turn streets into what Europe has been doing for many years, right? Which would benefit all New Yorkers, not just Black and Latino people. So I'm all for it. You know, it's not like I'm against it. I just want to know, you know, I understand, Christine, that this is what you do. This is your focus, transportation. So if that's what, you know, you feel will do something in that area, then I get it. But I just want to know what the intent is, the outcome, because I feel like focusing on this will help all New Yorkers, which is a very good thing, because I think we're moving from a car culture to a pedestrian culture. But to me, that was already happening anyway. So we can fight for that, but I think that is what the future of this city is.
Right.
I
I think what you said, you think it's happening, and unfortunately, it's happening in surface only. And what Dale and I and Viren are working with all the time, we see all the obstacles below the surface, which are making it that it's nearly impossible to make it happen.
Yeah, I didn't say it was
That is
happening. It's not like it's not like I'm just looking at the surface. I didn't say it was happening. I just said that is what people are, that's what the conversation is. I see that's what people want to move to, not that it's actually happening.
Right.
I think
And
this
so
is part and parcel of that movement, Josephine, to conceptualize all the open space that pedestrians, cyclists, and drivers engage, that is public space, and to look at it in a more equitable way, and to look at it in a more pedestrian and bike-friendly way. This is part and parcel of that objective.
I mean, I understand that, Dale, but a couple of years ago, we had a school, I believe it was on West 18th Street. Was it the Ruston School? They wanted to have open streets on 18th Street. And this is a largely Black and brown school. It's a building and has about 5 different schools. And I remember that they had come to this community board, and the community board turned it down. There was a lot of neighbors that showed up and said, oh, we don't want these kids in our streets. But meanwhile, right, they do it for the white schools all the time. You go down to Battery Park, even PS 11 over here, they will shut those streets down for the schools that are white. But then for the Black and brown schools, especially if they're older kids, oh no, there are condoms on the street, there are knivings, there are this, that, they make too much noise, and they completely shut it down. And so that's what I'm talking about. That to me is the heart of inequity when in terms of street access. And that's
absolutely
right.
I mean, I was at those meetings and I was appalled at the tone that our neighbors in Chelsea took in response to a group of school kids. And I publicly shamed our neighbors about their response, because they were criminalizing the children of that school.
So it sounds like everybody's raising some really important issues this evening. I know James has had his hand up. So let's go over to James real briefly. James, well,
I guess I'm hoping we can, I'm trying to see what our endpoint is again, because that's, what is our actionable item? And as you recall, when we were having a conversation about what the whole goal of the social justice working group would be, one of the things that I pushed for and that was adopted was, measurable outcomes, right? So I think before we even have the conversation continue, it would be important for everyone to understand what the data is. And I would, for one, would love to know, for example, what is the breakdown of the budget of the DOT in terms of its commitment to vehicular transportation, bicycle transportation, and pedestrians. And Christine, I know we probably have general numbers, but I'd love to see the actual numbers. And then I would love to see what the estimated cost would be, for example, of increased enforcement on private owners to improve the quality standard of sidewalks. Dale, I think you bring up great points. But again, as it regards whether it's stop and frisk, jaywalking, the freedom to move, that's a different issue. All needs to be addressed. They're related, but can we really have a comprehensive sidewalk policy that covers everything? So I'm just, Dale's like, yeah. And I hear what you're saying. It's a much more complicated conversation. And I think it limits our ability to make an impact on a specific issue. What Josephine's talking about, which I agree with wholeheartedly, is, why don't we identify those issues that we can sort of wrap our heads around, explain succinctly, and back up with data, and then move forward with that initiative. Because I agree with you, Viren, that this is how conversations start. And to be honest, at the beginning of this conversation, I was like, what are we talking about?
Yeah.
But now I understand like the implications, but because it's a bit of a spider web, I would prefer, and I would hope everyone would prefer, that we narrow it down to something that we can, address in a targeted way, so that we can actually accomplish something, rather than it just be part of this long, bigger conversation that could go on for years. I mean, I've been on this community board for years, and I hate waiting 9 years for change. Let's make some change.
Well said, James. And I think, in fact, that's a nice point for us to transition to the next agenda item, which is, frankly, as we all know, who've been on this.
Katie, for 1 second.
Well, we need to wrap up on this and say what
exactly.
Yeah, Leslie had his hand raised. Leslie?
Oh, great. Oh, I didn't see that. Sorry, Leslie.
I had just a quick question. It's a follow-up to what Josephine was saying and what Dale was talking about, which was the people being, and also Christine, about pedestrians being arrested for jaywalking, etc.
Right.
It would be important to know what those numbers are and address those with the local precincts that we have, to pursue that. That I think is a real tangible thing to follow up on.
I think it doesn't happen very much in our district. It happens in the Bronx and in other places much more than in our district.
Can I just attempt one, packaging a little bit of this discussion, which is that Christine presented the package, the discussion from a very big overview, like the city sidewalks and streets. And a lot of you have come back and said, what about this very specific instance of the, in our district? How does this affect our district specifically? It's that struggle that we discussed early on, from the parochial to the citywide or to the universal. So we are asking this committee if it would like to engage on the concepts of sidewalk equity. And the feedback I seem to be getting is that the engagement would be best put towards those very specific instances where, this is a problem in our district, or this is a pattern we've seen in our district, where a majority Black and brown school was denied equal access to open streets by our very neighbors. So I'm all for that, because I do see the through line between the parochial and the larger goal. So we didn't come saying, please, we didn't come with the intention of saying, please get on board with our plan to socialize the sidewalks of New York City. We are saying, these are this is the context for the sidewalk equity discussion coming from your transportation planning co-chairs, and we would like to engage it on the equity front.
Yeah.
I think we should wrap this up. I think the discussion has.
Well, just quickly, I just wanted to say something really quickly. I think this is great. I think that we can do stuff in our neighborhood, but also just if the city does take over the sidewalks, it just won't be in our neighborhoods. It will be in Far Rockaway, which is the outer boroughs. It'll be in Sheepshead Bay. It'll be in the Bronx. And those people will get better sidewalks. And their community boards can make certain decisions to tweak their local, whatever their local issues are. Same as we. So what we do is we start with our community board, narrow, but then on the broad picture, it would hit the whole city. So all people would be affected by this, whether you're brown, white, but the people that would see the drastic improvement, I believe, would probably be in the brown neighborhoods, because right now some of the homes aren't being upkept properly. So it would affect immediately. I think this is a good plan that Christine has brought to us, and I'm in favor of it.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
I wanted to suggest maybe that, we go back and we prepare kind of a resolution, something which is a little more tight than the discussion we had today, so that, and maybe, put some points in there which are related to the pure equity issue, and then you guys can discuss that at the next meeting.
That's what I was going to suggest. I think we have a few kind of issues that have been brought up.
Right.
So the conversation has yielded some pointers that we should follow through. So there are two ways of doing it. One is we sort of recap what has been discussed on this agenda item and circulate that amongst the task force members. And then you sort of, think about it, write for it, against it, whatever have you. Or we wait for you to write to us. Which one do you prefer?
Or actually, I was also going to suggest, in July, we had come up with a whole list of issues that this task force is going to address. And I think that we can see here on this call this evening that there is definitely interest in some of this. I think that this issue should be added to our list of issues that are being addressed. And we ask for people who are interested in working on that issue. And then that group works on it and then comes forward, just like our other issues, comes forward or back to the task force to present on it.
Yeah, Katie, we already have that on our list, actually. The streets, we don't call it equitable streets, but the streets and public space is one of the recommendations.
It's one of the big issues. And I was going to say, we can just make this very specific underneath that. But so I think that that this is,
correct me if I was wrong, Christine, but I think, were you proposing that we work jointly and draft something and jointly and then send it to?
Well, I was proposing that we narrow down, because here what we were doing is exposing the whole thing, right? So we have heard that this was too wide and, it was too, in which we agree, obviously that was the intention too, but so maybe make it more local and make it more narrow and come back with that and send it around and see whether there is a group of people who want to work on it, or we can move. I mean, we can decide next time. What's the decision?
So here's what I'm going to suggest now. I think we're going to do the recap, and if there's anything that is missed out by any of us, other folks can contribute more to it. And I think that document will go out fairly soon, by the weekend.
Okay.
Right. Okay.
All right. That was.
And then you're right. At the next meeting, then we can decide if anybody,
yes,
how we want to move it forward.
Exactly. And prior to that, people can comment on it, people can add to it, people can sort of react to something that they don't think is actionable, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Sounds good. Thank you all. The next agenda item is basically looking at, and I'm going to try and share screen with you all so you can see it. This is so this was the list. Can everyone see it? I'm going to try and see if I can make it larger so it's more legible. Better?
Yep. Great.
Okay, so this was the list, and we put people's names down next to the item that they were interested in. The intent at this point is to try and see if we can consolidate these items. And instead of having, I think we have about 17 items, 15 items now on the list. If there's a way to sort of break, really compress this and find items that have overlaps.
And also to hear about sort of progress on any of these by the people who have offered to start looking into it. And in fact, Viren and I can actually start with number 1 about the anti-racism training for the voluntary training for members. We have reached out to a previous CB4 member, Tanya, who many of you may know. And she has agreed to do sort of an informal training with the CB4 members of this task force first. We're going to start there. And it's going to be on a Sunday evening, or I guess Sunday afternoon, on January 10th. And so she has worked with the UN. She's worked with all sorts of organizations around the world, actually, on sort of exploring anti-bias issues and just having sort of great conversations and safe conversations. So we will send out sort of a more detailed thing about sort of Tanya's background and what she hopes, how she hopes to do this for 2 hours with us. And this sort of, and she said she really wants it to be a conversation. We all bring snacks via Zoom, of course, but we'll make ourselves comfortable. And sort of, and what she wants to sort of open the floor for us to discuss. Again, it's just going to be task force members first, and it will not be recorded. But we will send out a sheet, and anybody who wants to participate can, and if you can't, we understand that too. But we will have a little RSVP so that we can tell Tanya how many people to expect on January 10th.
Right, and just a couple of quick sort of clarifications. It's not a training session. It's a kind of, I think Tanya described it as more like a conversation or a workshop.
Yeah, exactly.
But it doesn't even have to be a workshop format, because I think she's trying to understand what the members of the task force are actually looking for before she, any other conversation. And I want to also thank Maria, because she's the one who pointed her to us.
That's
So
true.
thank you, Maria. I think she's on the call.
I am. You're welcome. I have a question, though. I was going to ask, so far is the plan with Tanya just to be, I'm sorry, let me just show myself. Is the plan with Tanya to be one session, or is there going to be more than one?
It's just one session right now that we've agreed to. Yeah.
The hope is, or the intention is, that we start with one session, and then during that session, depending on how the task force members actually respond, there may be a sort of further continuation of it, or some other form it might take. But nobody likes the word training, especially in our CB4. And no one wants to be trained because everyone knows what it takes to be fair and balanced, I guess. But it's going to be an interesting conversation, I would think. The other thing that I need to clarify, this is not going to be this is going to be for the task force to start with before it becomes anything larger.
Yep. Exactly. Okay.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Katie.
So I think neither Tina nor Leslie are with us this evening about number 2.
Leslie was here.
Leslie's here.
Oh, is she? Oh,
He,
further down.
Leslie, he.
Oh, sorry. You're right. I was thinking of Murphy.
Yes, yes.
Hello, Leslie. Do you have anything about number 2 to share with us this evening? Any updates? Oh, Leslie, we can't hear you if you're speaking.
Leslie, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can.
Okay. No, I'll have to reach out to Tina, and I'll get back to you shortly after we talk.
Lovely. Okay.
Also, while we're at it, if I have missed anybody's name or anybody else wants to add their names to any of the items, please feel free.
Mm-hmm.
May I interrupt, Katie? I thought the idea there was going to be to prioritize those, because obviously you're going to have, everybody cannot be working on everything. So I was under the impression that this section of the agenda was to
prioritize. Yes.
Yeah, it's true. You're right. Yeah.
That's okay. That's fair.
And it's a little tricky, I think, to know how to go about that, because, as Josephine mentioned earlier, and as others have alluded to, there are obviously, there are so many issues, and there are only so many hours in each day and so many volunteers who can be working them. And so, I think, our goal here is to try and figure out, so which ones do we want to focus on, and who needs, and and where do we need more help or more volunteers, and how do we do that? And I know that some people have already been working on their issues, but you're right, instead of maybe going through each of them, it would be helpful to hear.
I think each person here could be telling you, okay, these are my top 2, something like that, and why. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, Katie, if you don't mind me starting out.
Please.
Yeah, it's Hector.
Hey, Hector.
I've been working at number 8 actually. If you don't mind scrolling down, which is identifying after school recreational programs. I've been in contact with the 10th precinct and PSA 4, and we're trying to get things going with get more inclusive programs with the Youth Explorers and the Police Athletic League. And the way we're doing that is to hopefully, given the weather and the conditions, it's a little difficult and challenging, but I wanted to move forward with some plans. So when the weather is permitting and the indoor spaces are permittable, we can start getting back to sports again, that we could try to do stuff with the youth in the community to build up that relationship between the neighborhoods and the cops again, which has been kind of waning over the years. So it's an ongoing conversation. And considering another way we're trying to do that, I had a meeting with the Deputy Commissioner of the YCO program, which is the Youth Coordinating Officer program, which was a new program that was introduced this year. And basically what that was going to address is that there were going to be officers from each precinct that are going to be addressing youths in peril. Basically, prime example is we had that shooting up on 26th Street not too long ago at the LHLC houses, unfortunately. And we had a big meeting there. There was a lot of officers involved with that. And the announcement was that they were going to move forward with certain new methodology when it came to dealing with youth, especially of brown and black, or any youth in jeopardy, actually. But unfortunately, in this particular case, it was some black and brown individuals that were involved. So the methods they're trying to move forward with is basically, instead of just taking the underage suspect and just treating him like a regular criminal. Obviously a shooting is very severe, but they have to handle it a little differently, unfortunately, and they have the certain methods to deal with that. But instead of the old ways where they would try to just treat him like an adult, which was incorrect in my opinion, and I know that wasn't always the way to go, but unfortunately it seemed to turn out that way. They were going to basically have these youth coordinating officers involved and keep in contact with these youths to find out, and and coordinate with the parents as well and the community as well. So, and they have these youth stat meetings every month, where basically these officers all get together and they compare notes and they keep track of certain youths that they know for a fact that have had issues in the past or repeat offenders, and where basically they could see that and predict that these kids are going down the wrong path. So hopefully this will be a way for us to head up at the past some of these kids going down the wrong road in the future. So I'm supposed to be having a meeting tomorrow with these youth coordinating officers. I have not met them intimately yet. The big meeting we had about a month ago with the Tenants Association presidents that were involved with Miguel Acevedo and Darlene Waters. They were in attendance, along with a representative for the Hudson Guild. And basically we got to meet pretty much all the folks involved. But it's a big program, and honestly, it seems very promising. It's a different approach than I think the police have taken in the past, as of late. And I think this may solve some of the issues that are coming up in these at-risk neighborhoods, unfortunately. And basically, that's it pretty much for now. I mean, I'll hopefully have some more to report a little later after I have these meetings and find out these specific strategies these officers want to take. So it seems pretty promising, but it's not going to fix a huge problem, but immediately. But I'm thinking about the generation to come, that hopefully it'll address some of the issues that they're having, and maybe we can facilitate some other avenues for them to take their aggressions out, or create some kind of environment where they can find a way out of the situations that they're in.
I know, thanks for that, Hector. I know you'd mentioned when we were originally talking about the recreational programs and after-school programs and things, like you said that the Police Athletic League has some pretty big indoor space in other places, in other districts, where they can meet with students. I mean, I know that you'd said that obviously with the weather, it's hard because of the outdoor park space, but are there places indoors, or is that something that would be helpful to try and find indoor spaces, or is it just because of, frankly, COVID right now, it's not even worth it trying to find?
It's unfortunately, COVID has been a big obstacle in setting up a lot of these events. I mean, as traditionally they would have basketball games or some sort of sports related events, and honestly, it's not possible at the moment. Okay. And yeah, in the past we've had challenges with spaces, because this is not the first time I've approached the police. We've had discussions with the Police Athletic League, and it always seemed to have issues with finding space here on the west side. So, I'm hoping conversations with the Hudson Guild will hopefully free up some space, and we can see if we can do something with that.
Yeah, that's what I was about to suggest. I mean, NYCHA has community centers, and Hudson Guild, I think at least in 2 locations, they are the ones who are operating those. And
right, but unfortunately with the COVID, all that's been shut down. There's no activities going on inside the buildings, pretty much.
All right.
Okay.
Anybody else?
I can talk
about.
about.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, Josephine. I apologize. I just want to add one more thing. I am reaching out to a program called through the Veterans Alliance that basically they are. I apologize. Anyway, it's they offer training for particular for veterans, but also for individuals of certain backgrounds that need that sort of help at risk, so to speak. And they're called Empower Digital. I'm basically just waiting to get a conversation going with them. And they deal in digital training, basically online certifications, PC repair, that kind of thing. So, and they address, hopefully we can get something going with that, maybe a partnership somehow.
Great.
So I'm trying to see how, we can set that up somehow, or some other organizations like that. Okay. I'm sorry, Josephine, you go ahead, please.
Sorry.
Okay. Thank you, Hector. We're working on number 9, connecting workforce development organizations with community groups. So Rose Kitt and I are, the whole point of this really is to sort of begin a discussion on education and job training for Black and Latino low-income youth 18 to 24. So far, there have been 2 calls, one with Amazon and one with Google, and they're both actually were quite promising. I have notes on this, and I can forward it to the group, and we could put it in the Dropbox for everyone. There's tons of information to go through. So I'll just be very brief about what a few programs that they did discuss. So from Google, they have a paid apprenticeship, which I really like because it's paid, and I'm looking for internships that are actually going to pay people. And this would be for students working on site at Google for 6 months, and they receive training and from an actual provider like BMCC. Google actually works with a well, right now they're working with BMCC, but they're open to working with other CUNY schools or other partners to train these students. And these are for kids 18 years or older, and the program size is about 100 capacity. The other thing that they're doing is called Code Next, and this is specifically designed for Black and Latino high school students interested in careers in technology. So they're working at the on-site lab in Chelsea, and the program size for that is about 100 youth as well. And then I'll just take you through Amazon. What Amazon is doing is they actually have something that's quite interesting, and I had never heard about it before, but they have something called the AWS Restart Cloud program. And apparently this whole cloud technology has created an opening for 2 million jobs. A lot of companies are looking for people who have these credentials. And what they offer is a 12-week program, and it's specifically geared towards underemployed people or people who have not been employed for quite some time to learn skills in cloud adoption. So they do this in 4 cohorts a year of 25 people per cohort with the goal of training 100 people per year for employment. And they currently are working with a community-based organization in Brooklyn and the Bronx called Per Scholars, but I'm hoping that they're willing to expand and maybe look at Hudson Guild as a potential site. They also have something called the Future Engineer Scholarship Program, where they're giving 100 scholarships for $40,000 each. They offer a paid internship at Amazon. The person has to be a US citizen, high school seniors pursuing a college degree in engineering, and they must have completed 1 computer science course. So anyway, these are very big initiatives that they're working on. And so Rose has many contacts in with groups that we're trying to reach. So we're going to start building out on that and reaching out to these groups and building a list. Also, Kit does a lot of work in the Bronx, so I'm really interested in trying to tap into some of the schools that he's working with. I know that the goal was to stay within CB4, but I think our community here is like 65% white. So, we will be able to work, hopefully work with Miguel at Fulton Houses, and also work with Darlene at Chelsea Elliott, and let them know what's happening and how these young people can put their applications in, get their applications going. But, we're limited about what we can do here because of the population that we are. So my hope is that, with some of the contacts that we have through Rose and Kit, that we could also help Amazon and Google reach out to further their partnerships. So they're very excited to talking with us and working with us. And the next step is basically getting, just building out those lists that we feel that will really come on as partners with them, and presenting that to them, and then just taking a sort of deeper dive into what some of these programs are. And there are just lots of them. So I could email that to Katie and Varin, and you guys could put in the Dropbox for anybody to look at.
Yeah, that's great. Wow, that's such good information. Josephine, I had a quick question about the Amazon Future Engineer Scholarships.
Yes.
You mentioned that the high school seniors have to be awarded such a scholarship, you have to have had a computer class. And I was just wondering, do you know the high schools in our district, do they all offer computer classes?
No, they don't all offer them. And there are a couple of high schools, some are sort of borderline to our district, but we do have, there are 3 of them, actually 4, that are specifically geared towards engineering. So we can definitely work with them. It works very well. And all of these schools are actually Title I schools. So these are high needs students, and most of them are Black and Latino as well. So yes, we actually have 2 in this district, and then we have 1 that's like on 60 something street, one of them, and then another one that used to be in Chelsea, but recently moved further down to Soho, but it's still called the Chelsea Career and Technical High School.
And just as a reminder, CB4 did a community needs assessment, and having youth be employed in our district was one of the 4 categories that was noted.
Yes, thank you, Maria. Yep, that's
So-
what started
so-
this whole thing.
So thank you.
And what
for
I
your
love
work,
about
Josephine.
thank you, Maria. I would love to get you involved as well. What I really appreciate about the Amazon program is that the cloud training that they're doing it goes beyond 18 to 24. So of course that's our focus, but I'm just so happy that they're allowing, they're teaching, 30 and 40-year-old people how to reinvent themselves with these new skills. And so this creates a whole new level of opportunities, even possibly working with some of our shelters, some of our general population, recently homeless adults that may have the skills to get them into this kind of program and on the road to something better.
Josephine, thanks. I don't know if you had a chance to look at Microsoft. They also have similar programs, and I'm scratching my head right now. I did come across something which I have saved somewhere, so I'll definitely share it with you. But they have similar programs as Google and Amazon. I'm not quite sure if all the panelists can see the questions in the Q&A. Michael Wiggins is writing that Little Island is hiring. Can people see the questions or okay, good.
So Varian, I just wanted to really thank Josephine for also taking the lead on this and for making these conversations happen. I do think that in addition to Google and Amazon, there are organizations like Black Girls Code and Girls Who Code, that there's a way to provide sort of options where young people are, kids of color are, so that we can offer a variety of opportunities, not only for those who are a bit older, but for young people. And I think what's nice about that is many of those organizations work with Google and Amazon. I also feel it's interesting because they are not as plugged into the types of organizations. It sounds like they always have challenges in finding appropriate candidates for this, which I think speaks to the kinds of networks that they have. So it is, to me, something that is pretty concrete, that we can play a role not only as a convener, but a connector for young people, and to offer them what I think, particularly coming out of COVID, will be critically important, which are paid internships. Also allow you to get a jump on future career opportunities. So I think within the district, but also thinking more globally in the borough of Manhattan, there are some great opportunities for that. So just wanted to put my 2 cents in.
Thank you, Rose. I'm glad that you said that as us as the connectors, because that's the way I see it too. And when I approached the, I don't know which call it was, but my whole thinking in my brain is that I wanted to create an employment pipeline for this youth, because that's what we're lacking, right? The need statement that Maria had talked about is that these our young people do not have the connections to get their foot in the door, right? It's not like, oh, I know somebody who knows somebody for this internship or this job or whatever. We don't have that in our community, or we're lacking in that. Unless you're, happen to be, a friend of the Dinkins family or whatever, but the majority of us don't have those opportunities. So that's why that this is so important for us to make those connections. So,
and the flip side, I think is true, Josephine, to what you said, that not only do the kids, the young people, not have the connections, but at the same time, the companies themselves don't have the connections to really be able to effectively reach out to the communities, or so that a lot of kids don't even know that these things exist, right? And so to become the connector, to become the way that we can put together a list of, these are all of the internship opportunities available to young people and help them know about them, I think would be such a great thing that we do.
And to really push it too, because I know that one of the issues is that, you know, there are a lot of Black organizations with that have members with extraordinary talent, MBAs, lawyers, and meanwhile they go on these job, whatever they're called, job forums for these companies, and a company will say, well, I couldn't find anybody. Well, how could you not find anybody, right? There are so many people who are ready to do this work and have all of these, you know, all of the credentials, but somehow they're still not getting in the door. So I'm not even just talking about the youth that are underemployed or haven't been employed in a while. I'm talking about Black women and men with MBAs and law degrees and are still not getting access. So this is really about creating that access.
Josephine, if I could just add on to that, this also can be a model. I know that one of the things that I don't see here was to think about these strategic partnerships with organizations that are working within communities of color, that if we are successfully able to make these kinds of contacts, this is something that can be replicated throughout the borough of Manhattan, where there are people of color, and think strategically about partnerships with local electeds in the borough president's office so we can disseminate the information. Another piece of that around education is that the New York Urban League, which is located in Manhattan, does a historically Black college fair that we should be thinking about partnering with as well. But I do think this could be a model that's replicated that CB4 plays some leadership on and serves as a connector, which I always think is extremely important to other communities throughout the borough. And quite honestly, I feel that the reason why these institutions are and many other institutions in a city that is as diverse as New York is like, we can't find a person of color to fit, you know, for certain roles that they're hiring, is because their professional and personal networks are not diverse. So if we can play a connector to talent pools, I think that's important. And this is just out of turn, but since there's so many points being made, is that one of the most important conversations we will need to have next year is around the vaccine. And making sure that communities like CB4 are understanding, and maybe this is something we can do with NYU, get their health professionals to talk about why it's critically important for everybody within the confines of this community board district to take the vaccine.
So Josephine, I have a comment on, you mentioned that you want to go beyond the community board. I think it would be helpful to make sure that we have exhausted all our options in community board 4. Mm-hmm. And
that was me, Christine.
No, Josephine said that before. And really look at the, even the school, you know, what are the profiles of the school, and reaching out to all the schools and going direct there and see whether the connector, there is, you know, if there is a connector in the district, like, then being able to go beyond that and bring people to that connector to make sure that it's everybody takes advantage.
Yes, that's the plan.
Yeah.
Christine, 1 second. I think we have 2 other folks who have raised hands. Sorry if I missed it. David Warren?
No,
David Warren,
that was it's an old end.
Oh, it is an old. Okay.
No, my hand is not up.
I just wanted to quickly mention the Highlines Teen Program. There's a deadline of the 18th. So if you have any, if you are able to get the word out quickly, it might be a good resource for if there are educators that you can reach out to with that. I put the link in the chat.
Thank
So
you.
piggybacking on Dale's comments, yes, there's a deadline for this one, but that's one of the things I'm happy Dale brought up, because the Highline probably will be coming to ACES at some point soon and talking about being the connector. That's what they think or want to think of themselves as a connector in the community. They recognized very early on in their first 10 years that they weren't connected to their actual community, specifically the NYCHA housing around them. They've done a great job at working to correct that, and moving through this pandemic and the social unrest. They're really being very thoughtful about it. They've hired a great person for this particular space who comes from workforce development. And what they envision is being that connector, not just the jobs on the Highline, but how, because of the fact they are connected to these huge developments, how they can be that connector for youth. And Hudson Guild is one of their partners. They did a great program of the New York City SYEP, Summer Youth Employment Program, which was shortened. It was a bridge program this summer. It was only 5 weeks. Hudson Guild was one of the hosts for that, and they partnered with the Highline. And hopefully it's something that that will eventually be able to be presented to people across our community to see the incredible work these young folks did, to think about, in fact, social justice and what it meant to them and how they can express that in the community. So hopefully the board itself will get a presentation from the Highline about the work that they're doing in this front, because it's not just for this coming season. They plan to be that connector for workforce, for youth employment for a very long time, and hopefully amplifying our own voice to what they're doing solidifies that they continue to do that work. And the only little asterisk I'll put to my note, I will disclose I am a board member of the Highline, but most of this information that I talk about has already been out in the open. They did use CB4's statement of district needs and use that particular section that talked about the lack of employment for teens as a place they want to focus on, and they should be coming to the board hopefully in the next few months.
Thank you, Dolores. Are you on the list on any of these items, Dolores? Have I missed your name here?
My name is not on the list because I missed the meeting when you assigned it. I apologize.
Oh yeah, okay.
But I am available for any one of them where someone may need help. The workforce development is something I do on my own already with teaching financial literacy. So happy to connect some of those organizations. And in terms of education, I'm also on a board of something called Salvadori, which may be a great fit for young kids, because what they do is they teach STEM education, and they've been doing it virtually the whole summer. And it really ties in well with development. So trying to get some of these huge developers like Related, et cetera, to get engaged and involved with young people to explain how we build buildings, and that construction can also lead to jobs down the road. So that's for another meeting, and I apologize, I was gone for about 50 minutes.
I will be emailing this document to everyone once again, so you can add your name to the list and email it back to Katie and I.
Great, thanks.
Kit, sorry to keep you waiting.
No apology necessary. Dolores and Dale sort of tag teamed on the point that I wanted to make, but I'll build on it. I do think we have a number of organizations in our district who are excited to also play this role of convener, connector, and a bridge in this area of workforce development. Highline, I think, is super promising. The folks at Little Island are also excited about contributing in that way. And my impression is the Shed might be as well. So I just want to call out that there is an attendee, Michael Wiggins, who has his hand raised, who actually is one of the leaders in this area for Little Island. So if we have time to open this up to the public, he might be able to speak to, I don't know where it currently stands, but some of the work that he was part of trying to convene across organizations in our district in the area of workforce development.
Okay.
Great. Baron, do you know how to bring him over?
Yes, I'm going to look at, yes, I'm going to allow to talk, yes. Michael, you can speak now. You'll have to unmute yourself.
I think I have. I've tried to. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, fantastic. So, this is my first time at your task force. So thank you for, well, thanks for convening this space. It's really exciting. You really are leading in this space right now. And I'm thrilled about the conversations I've been listening in on here. I just, Kit really shouted out everything I just wanted to touch on. There are a lot of groups that are meeting right now called the West Side Cultural Network, that includes the High Line, Little Island, the Shed, White Columns, the art gallery a little bit further down, close to the Whitney. Jane Carey was the first convener of that group, and we're doing a couple of things in this space right now. I think there was a deck that Kit may have been referring to, which was called West Side Pathways, which is very similar to what's happened on the Lower East Side, where they have an employment network with some wraparound services for people and training. That's been my passion project over at Little Island. I'm trying to create or think about creating pathways to employment and learning opportunities. I think Maurizio over at the High Line and his new team doing amazing work in that space, and I think they're putting a lot of resources toward it. Right now, we're moving toward opening, and our strategy has always been about friendship. So this offer that I put in the chat has been shared a couple of times in various ways. I have run 2 workshops so far with my team called Resumes and Resilience, with people who were thinking about applying for jobs at Little Island. And really my commitment as a department right now, and my boss is behind me on this, is that if you look at those job descriptions, see that they're all on the website, and they're going to continually be updated. A lot of opportunities coming up for part-time seasonal work specifically that might be appropriate for a lot of young people. But if you send names directly to me before those people apply, my department's promise is to spend time with them to help them get their resumes in order, and to address their resiliency and their confidence, and get them ready to interview, because we would like to make them successful. So we've been, I guess you call it hand-holding, with a number of individuals as they move through the process. And that's our strategy. We've done pretty well in our workforce development goals, which are real specific. And I'm really proud of the numbers that we've gotten, and the diversity, quote unquote, the diversity of our team is real at all levels right now. And it's been all intentional. So what we're doing right now is depending upon you, because we're not gonna be running job fairs. We're really depending on personal relationships. And I hope that you write down my email and take my phone number, and we're a small shop. I know that the project that I work on has a big reputation, and it looks big, but the way we're working in our not-for-profit space, which we are not-for-profit, is very mission-oriented and very one-on-one. So I've spent time with individuals working on their resumes and have moved some people forward in the interview process. And we're happy to participate and talk to you about this all the way through, on a programmatic level. But those one-on-one relationships are really what I'm hoping to capitalize here on, and to maximize those relationships. But I will share some stuff with you. I'll share some stuff with Kit and other people who I actually know have met on this group, to make sure you're hip to some things that are happening, I think, behind the scenes, especially around internships and creating a real open portal for internships, and possibly some micro-credentialing, which I think people are excited about, and we've made some progress toward. Okay, I hope that made some sense. Anyway, thanks for letting me chat with you.
Thanks, Michael. Good to hear your voice. And if you shoot anything over to me, I can forward it to Katie and Viren so they can share it with everybody in this group. I had one thing that I wanted to share that's sort of separate from this, which is a suggestion of how we might prioritize. I'm happy to hold on that until everyone's shared, if that would be better, or to make that suggestion now.
Now would be great.
Okay, cool. So my second meeting with this task force, so very much still in listen and learn mode, but perhaps because I wasn't here when we came up with the list that we're looking at, when I was reading it, it seemed that there were some buckets that we could consider, and hearing Hector and Josephine, really sort of confirmed for me something that I've seen on other committees that I'm on, which is the way that we influence and get things done as a board is by individuals on the board sort of taking the initiative and pursuing passion projects, and tapping into their personal network. So perhaps if we reorganize based on buckets that I think a lot of these items fit into, and everyone who was interested in specific buckets could go after the sort of discrete tasks that the list currently is, we would have a cleaner set of, these are the priorities for the Social Justice Task Force. So just to throw it out there, and this could be a bad idea, we probably need to wordsmith these. It seems like there were at least 3 categories. One is shifts that we want to see for MCB4. Things like we want folks to participate in anti-racism training. We want to have 2 co-chairs in every committee. The other was engagement with community-based organizations. I think that's stuff like what we've just been talking about in terms of being a bridge or a partner for folks who are working on workforce development. It's connecting with other community boards to see what work they're doing in this area, connecting with orgs that are focused on Black and brown communities, whether any number of things that those groups are doing. And the third feels like ad hoc projects with agencies and local businesses. I think that's where work like what Hector was talking about, the NYPD might fit. But I think if we tried to say, instead of 15 things, there are 3, maybe there's a 4th and a 5th category that I'm missing. There are a small number of categories, and we shift to thinking about all of these items as fitting into one of those and being something that somebody could run with. We might have a clearer way of articulating what it is we're trying to do.
Sorry to interrupt you, but we actually started with 3 buckets. So what you're looking at were actually in 3 separate buckets, and then we sort of really narrow them down and make a shorter list, because originally we had about 27 items on it. So what you're looking at is a kind of a shortened list of tasks. But yes, they still belong to those 3 buckets, and I'll tell you what the buckets were. The first one was the CB4 focused, second one was youth services and community engagement, and the last one was NYPD focused.
And so it's funny. So Kit, I mean, you nailed all 3 of them exactly. And it's a good point that maybe putting them back into the buckets in a way would be sort of helpful as a way to just sort of refocus. You're right, because I think we wanted to sort of have people identify underneath them. But it's a really good point that really we do have these sort of 3 different things. And it's interesting, your last point, instead of calling it sort of NYPD focused, which is what we had done originally, by saying that it's sort of ad hoc projects with city agencies, because it really raises like the question that we were addressing at the beginning of this call about, you know, the sidewalks and things, and about DOT and sanitation and things. That probably does fit more under that bucket, right? That not just NYPD, but just city agency interaction issues. But you're right, but that also, I think, redoing them into our different buckets does help us sort of think about what the priorities are.
I think that might be another way of reframing these topics, and maybe we can now create, you know, new buckets along the similar lines, but we identify issues and people, and then sort of recategorize those. Because in terms of, you know, we keep coming back to this point about how do we prioritize these? But there are at least three separate strands that we are following. And we have different people working on different things. So maybe it's a moot point whether we prioritize youth services first, or then agency sort of related issues second, or CB4 first or CB4 second. I think that's become the kind of redundant, right? Because we have, you know, at least 20 people. They are not here right now, but we have at least 20 people on the task force. And on an average, we have about 2 to 3 people for each task. Mm-hmm. So there might be a way to sort of pursue the conversation in tandem, but not discuss them at every meeting. We can do that kind of priority. So this time we discuss, let's say, CB4 focused, and the next time we focus on youth services and whatnot. So that way each one gets enough time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. And I know, for example, that our January meeting, well, there are 2 things happening in January, right? That we'll have this open discussion led by Tanya for our task force committee members. But then at our next meeting, we're hoping that we will have this presentation and then Q&A session available about CCRB. And so that will be focusing sort of on the police accountability issue. And I think that Jesse had mentioned also a topic that we discussed previously, also in connection with policing issues, was the issue of the use of facial recognition software. And we're hoping to have a presentation about that as well. So maybe we would try and focus on those issues at our January meeting, which is sort of our city agency focus or our bucket. And then maybe at the February meeting, we could hear more about the engagement with the community groups, because a lot of this workforce stuff that you guys have been working on, it sounds so great, and getting more details about that. And the other bullet points that fall underneath the community group stuff, I think that could be really great. Does that work as a suggestion?
Yeah, I think so. Let's hear from everyone else. I mean, does that make sense for everyone?
Yes.
Okay, raise your hand. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Good. Yeah, I think that is useful to think of it as each meeting focusing maybe on one of the buckets.
I think so.
And I am mindful of time, and I know some people have to go, and we're just a few minutes away from 8:30. If we do focus our next meeting in January on the city agency stuff, is there anything else that anybody wants to raise right now to add to the agenda in January?
I was going to add something, Katie, but I stopped because I think January may be actually full. If we get someone from CCRB and if Jesse comes back with the facial recognition, we're going to take that on. So we might, because we've been waiting for that facial recognition presentation for the longest time.
Yeah.
So if those two come through, that's right off the bat, you got at least 1 hour covered.
Yeah.
But I was going to suggest something, and I'm just going to throw it at you so that you look into that. If you haven't looked at it, the mayor's what is it called? Where We Live NYC Fair Housing Plan. It's worth looking at. And I will email the link to everyone. It's worth looking into that because it's actually touching upon many of the fair housing issues that typically city doesn't talk about. And one example of that I'm going to throw at this community board is because it might come here as well. If you don't know, Soho is undergoing rezoning. And MIH program is going to be introduced there in Soho. So there is a kind of effort in place to bring affordable housing in a sort of more mandatory way in community boards, community districts that otherwise didn't have that situation before. So I'll share both those links, and that was the point. That was the topic I was going to add to the agenda list as a discussion item, but I don't think we might have enough time for that. And don't, I'm sorry, Kitty. One more item. We discussed Equitable Streets matter. That might have to be revisited at that point in time if people come back with comments.
Got it. And Rose, I see your comment in the and what you said earlier too about doing something about the vaccine. I do think that's very important. I would think that would be something that we would want to do quickly, but also at the full board level, right? Not even at this level. I mean, I think that it's such an important issue for our entire.
So the NAACP just launched a series on this, and it's pretty amazing the number of people who are resistant to taking vaccine.
Yeah.
And obviously there's a real history why in communities of color there isn't an interest to do that. But I think for CB4, if we could think about a strategic partnership so that we could help allay those concerns as we're waiting for the vaccine to sort of come down to for all of us at the resident level. But I do think there's a lot of resistance to it. And I know at NYU where I work, we just had a conversation about this. And if we could think about the, partnering with the medical school, the nursing school, and thinking about who are the partners in a social media campaign that could help us think about it, I think it would be very powerful to do. And the one point that I would just make about city agencies is that, do we want to be forward-looking, given that in very short measure, there will be a new administration citywide, locally. And so it could be an opportunity for us to be in the forefront of identifying issues of concern, even if it's at the municipal level, for this community board district.
I'm sorry, Rose.
The only comment that I wanted to make about that in terms of doing it at full board level or here at the task force is clearly we have more people that attend our full board meetings, and we want that outreach for the vaccine to reach as many people as possible. And in terms of the agencies, I mean, we just had a very, very comprehensive presentation at our full board on contact tracing and the actual program that's in place. And I think what's really important is to plug in to what the city is doing right now and the state's doing right now. Maybe it's not the city, but maybe it's the state, because if the message that comes through isn't consistent, that also tends to create some issues. I think if specifically to addressing Black and Brown concerns and issues that we do in this forum, that would be great. But I think at the full board, the city or the state message that's coming through is going to be more accurate, maybe not about people, how they feel, but about what's available, where it's available, how people can access that, where they can access, where they can connect in, what apps are already set in place by the state that people can register, et cetera. And I think it's real important to make sure that we're consistent on information with something as important as the vaccine.
I'm not disagreeing with you about that. What I was specifically talking about is the vaccine. We know overall there's a serious issue with contact tracing and people not following up. What I was referring to is more globally the work that is being proposed by this task force, in terms of working with city agencies and to understand that there will be a change in short measure, and that we may want to see this as an opportunity to think and propose ideas that are specific to this community board district, that are worthy of attention and action before everybody else puts forth their interest. And it may be something that is done more at the borough president level. But I think for the vaccine, there were a lot of concerns about the vaccine, and I would hope that we would be able to target this to Black and Brown communities.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. All right, well, I think these are really helpful suggestions, and I do think it's interesting. I think it's important that we think about getting this information out, as we said, to as many people as possible. So maybe at a full board as opposed to a task force meeting. And I do think it's actually two different pieces that I think are both really important. One, to your point, Dolores, it's important that we get the sort of the facts out about how the vaccine is going to be distributed and how it's going to work, and make sure that it's the same message coming from the state and the city. At the same time, Rose, to your point, like the attitudes about this and the concerns, and how there are a lot of people who seem to be resisting the idea of, even when it is available, of getting it, and addressing some of those, I think is important, as well as addressing the bigger issue about, are there differences between the, in the different racial groups in our city?
Well, we know for Black and Brown people, there are serious and valid concerns about the way in which that they have been used in scientific experiments. And that's
right.
and valid and should be acknowledged. And surely we should be talking about how the vaccine is going to be distributed in our district. But what I'm focused on, given the mission of this task force, is about underserved communities and people of color, which is where I think most of the concerns lie in terms of communities that were disproportionately affected by COVID, and yet there are very strong resistance to taking the vaccine because of the history of how our bodies have been used for purposes of experimentation.
So are you referring to the Tuskegee that's still it was done in the 30s and 40s? Is that what you're referring to? Things like that?
I'm talking about Tuskegee. I'm talking about women's reproductive health and how Black women were used. I'm talking about more recently the drug testing on people of color that are coming through city hospital systems. There's a very long history. I mean, there's statues that have come down because of the way in which Black women have been experimented on, and those carry forward to today. So when you hear people, when we're watching this incredible historic moment yesterday of people getting their vaccine, there are people that are talking about why are Black people, the Black and brown people, the first people that are being experimented on with this vaccine, when in fact it's a Black woman who's part of the team that have created this vaccine. So there is an opportunity for addressing the facts and the myths and to try to allay concerns and fears, particularly within a community that intersex as both being most affected and secondarily having serious concerns based in reality and history.
And present day. I'll just build on what Rose was saying, because this is an issue currently. We don't have the same healthcare that white people have, basically. It's just the truth, right? You go to the doctor, we are constantly told that, our pains are either in our heads. Black women have the highest, pregnant Black women have the highest mortality rate among pregnant women. This is a real problem that we are not getting the same access to quality healthcare. We have very few doctors that are actually Black. And so we are, constantly being sort of misdiagnosed or overlooked, our symptoms being overlooked. So this is a very real issue. And I feel like the person who comes in to have the conversation with the full board, yes, it's important to talk about the vaccine and how it's going to be distributed and all of that, but it's also very important to address these very specific issues, because this is what people need to hear, that it's not about just attitudes. This is about something that's very real, a mistrust of the medical community by Black and Latino people for a reason. And if you saw the way that people were dying during the height of COVID and the kind of medical care that they were getting, then you begin to understand why people are afraid.
So my suggestion is my biggest concern is, how do we actually address who we need to address? Are we already attracting the folks that really need to hear this message to any community board activity? Probably not. So what might be really good is, through maybe the NAACP's program and a couple other programs that are trying to get the word out on the truth about the vaccine and the impacts that it may or may not have, and dispel the myths. Maybe CB4 partners with one of these organizations to present that as a night of webinar, a night of forum, or something like that, because I think it'll be very difficult to, in our regular meetings, to go ahead and attract that audience. But if we're partnering with an organization that's trusted and that is already gathering the experts on this conversation, and add into that some of our local hospital systems that can speak to our demographics, et cetera, we'd have an opportunity by partnering with that bigger name to reach that audience that's already going to trust it. I think if we did it, we're going to be talking to the people who normally go ahead and connect into our meetings. And we may not have the impact that we want.
I think that's a great idea. I think there are many organizations that the community board should be partnering with anyway. And there are people of color in this district and organizations that we can think about that will be doing this. I mean, this will be the conversation of 2021 in terms of healthcare. And this is an opportunity for us as something that we had talked about as one of our interests is to be more connected to these organizations that are, you know, near and around our community. I don't think that's going to be hard to do, to think about those strategic partnerships.
I think it's a great idea, but I like what, I mean, I found very interesting what Josephine has said. And I think on that, we should have maybe someone speak at a separate meeting to us dealing with especially women of color, but people of color for bad medical treatment where their symptoms aren't taken as seriously even today. I think that maybe in the future, in a couple of months, maybe we should have a speaker speak on that directly, because I'm aware of it very peripherally, but I'd like to have more knowledge of that as someone on this committee, so that hopefully we can do that. I don't know if you know anyone who could speak on that topic, an expert. Thank you for bringing it up, Josephine.
Thank you.
We should also have a discussion with Jesse in case there are some relationships that already exist with you know, hospitals or other organizations that we might not, I might not be aware of. So I think we start with that and then we open up in terms of other folks that from within this task force, if people can recommend.
Is there anybody who would be interested in, or a couple people, in sort of taking the lead on identifying?
I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to do that.
Great.
And on the piece related to maternal mortality and the disparities of health care for Black and Brown people, that's pretty well documented, and we should get someone who's an expert on health disparities. And the point about maternal mortality is that these disparities regarding maternal mortality are regardless of socioeconomic status.
Yeah. Can I just ask, just for clarity, Katie, I guess,
yeah.
So for this task force, we're going to get someone who, we are going to have someone for this task force speak with us, yes?
Well, I think two things. I think we're going to look for an organization that we could partner with or support or co-chair or something, so we can encourage a broader community meeting or information session about the vaccines and help address the very real concerns Black and Brown people have about vaccines and trying to encourage them to take it, right? So whether that's the NAACP or whatever other groups are happening. And I believe that, Rose, that's one of the things you've said, is that you'll help identify what organization we could partner with to help get that information out there.
Right. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. And then two, to identify somebody who could speak to our full board about the vaccines, and then also give some history about, you know, health disparities, and then help us understand as a full board and our community, help us understand better about why there are concerns about it and why this is a very real issue, and how, and the importance of us as a board supporting everybody getting this vaccine. Does that make sense, Maria?
Yes, but I also just heard Rose talking about like an expert in, it's not infant, yes, thank you. I was gonna say infant mortality, but it's maternal mortality.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that part of are we also doing that as well?
Yeah, I guess I see that as
combined with someone talking about health disparities.
But maybe, I mean, but if you're saying that maybe it would be interesting just for our task force to also have an even deeper dive about sort of health disparities, that could be interesting. Absolutely.
I don't think we want to make, we want to focus on vaccine as one sort of item.
Okay.
Where we want
Okay.
to, right.
Okay.
Because otherwise, because that's the most sort of, critical
The most pressing,
item right now for the time being, at least month of January, February.
Maria, if you're interested in information about maternal mortality, the First Lady has written extensively about it, and the Commission on Gender Equity has focused on this a lot. So I'll try to pull up some information and I'll just send it over. Maybe I can send it over, Viren, and to you, so that the team can have it.
Thank you. And also the Daily Podcast did an episode on that, and it was really fascinating, really interesting.
On health disparities in general, Maria, or specifically on?
Specifically maternal mortality.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, thanks to everybody for raising this, because it's clearly a really important issue. And we will also reach out to Jesse.
Yeah.
To let him know that we think that this is something important that we get on the full board schedule. But that we as a task force, and especially Rose, you are going to be working on identifying who might be a good person to come speak to us, but also who we can partner with to try and encourage a broader message. Yeah.
Excellent.
Cool. And I really am aware of the time right now. Okay, so I think we are getting near the end here. Wow, look at that. Even though we didn't even have our first speaker for the first hour, we still had much to discuss. So thank you everybody for hanging in here as long as you did.
Thank you.
And we will work on pulling together the minutes and everything else.
I'll be sending out the document that I just mentioned, so people can add their names to it. And then in the background, we'll work on putting this back into those 3 buckets. So then we begin to sort of, pace it out over next couple of next 3 meetings at least.
Perfect. And we'll also
can I mention
sure.
one thing before we close? Just to make a comment to thank Maria and Rose for their support in terms of frontline workers in this whole episode of COVID.
Yeah, bravo.
Thank you, Maria.
Bravo.
Wait, why am I considered a frontline worker?
Well, you do. The work that you do is that.
Oh, social
workers?
Yes, I'm a social worker. Thank you.
You're out there.
Yeah.
So true. Bravo. Thanks. And then we'll also get out the details about, the January 10th conversation for all of us on the task force to participate in if we're available with Tanya. With that, I wish you all a very happy holidays, whether you're celebrating right now or celebrating in a week.
Oh, just real quick. I'm sorry, before we go, I know everyone wants to bail. This Thursday, we're supposed to be having the NYCHA work group presentation.
Oh, right.
It's for the general public. It's concerning, the NYCHA houses, LA, Chelsea, Fulton. And basically, we're going to be discussing the report that we've been working on for the past 14 months. So it's going to be a big night. So if anybody can make it, 6:30. And I believe Jesse sent out invites to everybody. And if not, it's on the CB4 website.
Great. Yeah, that's an important.
I think there's an invite already out. Hector, I will definitely send that link that I just mentioned to you about where we live, which was presented to the Planning Commission. It is very interesting to look at. Absolutely.
Great. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Good night and happy holiday.
Good night.
Thanks,
Happy
everybody.
holidays.
Bye.
Thank you. See you tomorrow, Christine.
See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.